Today I'm going to talk about grieving over a long-term relationship. How to get over it.
Welcome to the battlefield of love.
And first, if you're watching, you're going to get a treat because I'm going to be using this as a visual reference. For those of you listening on the podcast, I'm using a blender, or is it a blender ball from the blender cups? It's a little spiral, and I need a spiral for a visual aid today. Today's going to be show and tell. So again, if you're listening on the podcast, I recommend watching the first couple of minutes, or just watch on the YouTube channel. I'm going to talk about how I learned to grieve, first of all, and the stigma attached with grief. But before I get into all that, I need to address the impact of getting over a relationship, primarily the psychological effects that it had on me, and then how I got over it. Number one, intense emotional pain you're going to feel is going to be traumatic. It's going to feel like grief. You're literally going to bury a relationship that you had for a long time. There's going to be shattered trust, and there's going to be, again, a range of negative emotions. You're going to feel betrayal, anger, humiliation, failure. You're going to struggle with emasculation. You're going to question your self-worth, your attractiveness. All this stuff is going to come at you. If you have a family already, if you have children, you are going to be wrestling with whether I should stay or whether I should go. And that's really tough because you woke up one day and you were a husband and a father and provider, and then the next you are what? Well, you're still a father, but now I'm not a husband anymore because I don't know where this is going. Am I gonna divorce? Are we gonna get a separation? But there's something broken there, and there's already somebody in the relationship, and it's freaking turmoil. Then you start to internalize and blame yourself, right? You blame yourself for everything. You are like, man, if I would have made more money, if I would have dressed better, if I would have been in shape better, if I had a bigger penis, whatever. You're going to start getting down on yourself for not being good enough or whatever. You're going to be taking more of the blame than you should. I'm not saying you're blameless. I'm not saying that the circumstances for you getting to this point are merely your fault. But then again, every situation is different. Speaking for myself, is I took more of the blame than I should have, but in the end it worked out better for me. What I'm trying to do is not to have you feel the same way I did, unnecessarily suffering for things that you're not responsible for. So kicking yourself while you're down is not going to help, right? You're going to question again your worthiness, your attractiveness, your ability to maintain relationships, and it's going to lead you to a downward negative spiral. And those are going to make the situation even worse. It makes the feel of betrayal even more bitter. Infidelity is a complex issue. There's a lot of factors that go into it. which we're not going to go into now, but I'm just addressing the surface level things that you might be experiencing along those lines and how I grieve through them. Infidelity is a common thing. Unfortunately, a lot of people have experienced it in one way or another, and depending on your viewpoint, your religious preferences, etc., etc. Like, some people consider just intercourse infidelity. Other people consider just looking at somebody lustfully infidelity. Some people consider being too chatty with the checkout person infidelity, right? So there's different ways of quantifying it or qualifying it as infidelity. It just depends on what viewpoint you look from it, you know? Like, for me, myself, I'm a very outgoing person. I tend to be more flirty, and it's not from a place of like I want to, date people. I'm just open. I'm just charismatic. I like to connect with people, and that's one thing that my wife, who's more introverted, was like, okay, I've got to get used to the way he interacts with people, right? So, going back to what I said, it's a common thing, unfortunately, and it depends on what viewpoint and how you classify infidelity. Then there's the social stigma. There's a lot of societal pressure for men to be unaffected emotionally by the turmoil that this causes, but it freaking hurts. It is a pain that nobody wants to experience, and for men especially, we don't have an open space to like talk about it. There's been plenty of examples of celebrities and people opening up and openly weeping, and they get attacked for expressing their emotions. So there's no safe place, or if you don't have a safe place or a person that you can come and talk to and break down in front of, that's another hurdle that you have to get through. I've got these guys at K4. There's a lot of men's groups out there. There's forums. That's another thing I did, is there's forums. I think even on Reddit there's like cheating forums and stuff like that, where you can, at least if you can't get it fully out of your system, you can see that you're not the only one, and maybe that might help lessen the pain. But being able to talk about it, being able to write it down, like what I'm doing now, is going ahead and letting you know that there is other options, that there is other things that you can do, instead of just letting it stew and thinking all these thoughts and doing something rash, because it'll take you there. You can get very violent very quick, and then what? You're gonna lose your freedom for something that's really meaningless when you step back and there's time and you think like, what was I thinking? What was I looking at this person for? It's gonna come. Just remember, if you are dealing with somebody like the boss that I was working with, like, he was like, hey man, I see you're on your phone, I see you're distracted. And I just told him, I was like, hey dude, I caught my wife cheating on me. I took him to the side, and he's like, oh crap. And he was like, okay man, just like let me know if you need anything. I'll try to give you some like light duty stuff. And he was able to be a little empathetic with it, and just the fact that he knew what I was going through just got him off my back, because I know for a fact that I wasn't at 100% for a while. I started taking walks on my lunch break just to move some energy, just to not just sit in it. So if somebody's coming to you, or somebody that has told you or that they're going through it, just try to be a little empathetic. Try to be understanding. just listen, hold some space. They got to work through it. And another thing is, don't try to like give them all these books and all this stuff. They ain't having it right now. Their life is shattering. Their identity is broken. Their trust got broken. They're not going to be able to focus. So if you can hold a little space and maybe knock back some cold ones with them and just let them vent, try to do so. Especially if you haven't been through that situation, because people tend to get like preachy, or like in my instance, when I went to the confessor I had, the priest, he made this whole thing about because I got a vasectomy, that was the reason I got cheated on, which really put me in a bad spot. I cussed him out and I walked out in church. Yeah, I know. That's my bad. Sorry. Anyways, I was, feeling pain at the time, and that was the only quote unquote support or advice that this person could give me. Anyways, so let's talk about grief. In K4, one of the founders, Joshua Winner, he's a grief specialist. And I was able to really see what he does in person at one of the retreats that they do in Big Bear every year. It's very intense. It is amazing the knowledge that he has in that grief work, because he's been doing it for a while. He started when his brother committed suicide, and that was the journey that got him into grief work, which he then passed it on to us at K4, and I was able to work with him in a group setting during the retreat, and it was amazing. And what I got out of it was that grief is a cycle. See, what blew my mind was when I realized that in order for you to come back to feeling happy, feeling normal, without pain, you've got to go through the dark side. You've got to go through all those ugly emotions. You got to go through that mud with glass, and you got to crawl through it and get cut and all that stuff to come out the other side. I used to think grief was like this, right? It's just flat. You just got to get through it. But it's actually a spiral. And you can either spiral up or spiral down. But it's a cycle. You're going to feel those emotions, those negative emotions, and those instances of pain and anger, and then regret, and you're going to want to go back. And then we usually just stop there. I know I used to do that. I used to just stop in that wallowing and that pain, and it's never going to get away. But I never really went into them. I never really addressed them. So going into the darkness, like Carl Jung says, into the shadow, and really looking into what it is that's making you feel this way, why you're feeling this way. It's not for the weak of heart. But again, it's going to take effort. It's going to be intense. But when you come out the other side, it's going to get better. For me, was realizing that this person that broke my trust finally showed me their real colors. And that I realized that the person that I thought that I had in this relationship was never that person. That was a realization that I had, that they showed me their true colors. This is who really is the person that's with me right now. That veil got off my eyes. I was able to see them for who they really were. They showed me. They're a person that cannot be trusted. And that I chose that going forward, I will not be able to trust in that setting. So what do you do with the emotions and the memories and what you thought? Well, that's what they are. They're memories. They're memories that you remember, because if we both watch a car accident, you're going to remember things and see things that obviously I'm going to see differently. It's going to be the same car crash, but we're going to have two different perspectives. And if you're a car guy, you're going to be looking at structural damage of the car and if it's going to be salvageable or not. If I'm a doctor or EMT, I'm going to be looking at the people in the car, what kind of trauma they're going to be sustaining, like how you're going to be able to get them out of the car. It's going to be the same accident, but we're looking at it from different perspectives because we have two different viewpoints of the world. And there is memories that you both share, but the person that broke your trust showed you that this is who they are. That's what I gained. That's what I was able to grasp so I can move on. And all those memories and all those things that I shared with this person, I did share, and I did share out of love and care whenever I did them. Like, we have children, and I will remember, delivering, being in the delivery room and just being in awe of the act of birth, having respect for this person that gave me my children. But they no longer are that person that I thought they were. That's number one. Number two, I wanted to just forget this person ever existed. I wanted to erase them from my memory. I went through a visualization of this person not existing anymore. Literally just disintegrating. Atom from atom, just splitting apart. Like when Thanos snapped his fingers, right? And everybody just disappeared. I imagined that this person from my memories from inside of me just fizzling away and disappearing. Thinking about it, when I was able to just have them disappear from whatever, my psyche, from my heart, from my soul, it took a load off because I always wanted to come back. If you heard my first podcast, I talked about where this need for validation, and when I was a baby, I didn't get enough affection or attention. I've always seeked it since. Now I got a grasp of it. Now I understand it. Let me go back to the grief cycle. So I accepted that the person that was in front of me wasn't there. I went to hypnotherapy and I literally envisioned this person disintegrating from my heart, from my life. In reality, they still exist, but in here, in my heart, in my mind, they do not exist anymore. Number three is I learned what I didn't want from a relationship. I have data. Who invented the light bulb? Edison. He messed up 100 times, and he said, no, I didn't mess up 100 times. I just figured out 100 reasons why the light bulb won't work. Something to that effect. Correct me if I'm wrong. Put it down in the comments. I learned that I want clear communication. I want clear boundaries. I want to experience life other than just watching TV and eating junk food. I put all the stuff that didn't work, that I actually didn't like, and I was like, all right, so that's going to be my will not tolerate list, my non-negotiable list. Obviously, being faithful and being truthful, that's the top of my list. It's premium. So when I worked with Josh and he explained to us what grief was, it's not just in your mind, it's not just in your heart, but it's also somatic. It's in your body. There's ways to release it. There's exercises that we did that help us get into our bodies. And as men, we're taught not to cry or be more stoic, and it has a place. My view on it is, when you're a warrior, when you're at war, you don't want to show fear or pain or anything in your face, because that can give your opponent an advantage. At Cobra Kai, I train with a couple of pros. Even if they're hurt, you won't even know it till the end of the fight, when they're like, hey, my hand was broke or my foot hurt or whatever. But during the fight, you won't see it. That's so your opponent will not have an advantage over you. However, when you take off your armor, or if you don't take off your armor, you can't see if you're hurt. If you're always armored up, you can't see if you got cuts or scratches. And if you don't address those cuts or scratches, they turn into infection, and it gets even worse from that. You've got to take off your armor. You've got to take off that hard shell and look at what's cut and heal it. And addressing the fact that it hurts, addressing the fact that you're going through pain, that you had this world, you had this bubble with this person, and you shared a bunch of things. You had children with them, you had memories with them, with your family. There's things you did. That's true. That did happen. But you have to move on and burst that bubble to move on and deal with what is true. The facts that they broke the trust, that they hurt you, and now you have to move on. Deal with the pain of loss, of failure, of loss of identity. You're going to have to figure out what you want, and you already know what you don't want. And is that situation that you're just leaving behind, and addressing the fact that you feel pain, that you feel humiliated, that you feel emasculated, that you gave the best that you had at the time, and then you learn from, you grow from. And when you can look back at it and kind of talk about it without breaking down, there's a little bit more healing. And then when you can help somebody out like I'm doing now, it's a little bit more healing. And that's going through the dark side. Now, as I've done this multiple times, I can see the bright side of it. Like, I can be actually grateful that happened to me, because it was a great learning opportunity. Because I'm so far removed from it now. I can grab it, I can look at it, I can turn it around and see, like, well, this is where I learned that. This is where I learned this. And I can bring it and give it to somebody else and say, here, this is what I did to heal. You've got to cycle through it. Grief doesn't just, you don't just say, hey, I'm sad, and it cycles, man, and you're gonna cycle through it. And just like this thing, you know, it starts off small because you're just in it, then you get a little bit further from it, then you get a little bit further from it, then you get a little bit further from it, and it's not flat, it spirals. You can either spiral up and get better, or you can let it spiral you down and get worse, and numb with alcohol and drugs, and numb with pornography or prostitutes or whatever. It's a coping mechanism, and if it's not addressed, it will either drag you down or it could build you up. There's professionals that do this. There's a lot of resources out there. I'm putting my stuff out there. If you have questions and if I can help you out, I will. If I can't, I know plenty of professionals that I can point you towards. If you're dealing with friends that are going through this right now, share this video with them. Hold some space. Just listen. Sometimes, especially us men, just need to listen, because we're more efficient. If I call my friend up and say, hey, my car won't start, he's gonna tell me, okay, check the starter, check the battery. We're gonna start fixing things automatically, which is cool. Try to listen. Just try to be like, all right, bro, like, what's going on? One of the exercises that we did in the grief work was to face another man and have them explain the emotions that they're feeling or what's coming up for them. And it was like, I feel mad, I feel angry. And then every time I would stop, the person would say, all right, keep going. And I feel guilty, and I feel shame, and then every time I would stop, the other person would say, all right, keep going. They did this for like 5 minutes, but then you dig deeper, then you dig deeper, then you dig deeper. And then another exercise we did is I allow. And it was the same thing, but instead it started with I allow forgiveness, and I allow the feeling of revenge to go away. I allow for them to be happy, and I allow, and every time I would stop, say, keep going, the person would tell me keep going. And you go deeper, and you feel and you experience the burden lighten, because it's not in there anymore, and you're able to get out of your emotions and your rational mind, and you kind of have a stream of consciousness moment where you're able to really get in there without allowing your emotions or your logic to really filter you and stop you. So again, I hope this was useful. This is the battlefield of love. tips, tricks, strategy, and tactics for relationships. I'm your host, Job Gomez. Please like and subscribe, and I appreciate you guys being on the journey. If you're here this far, really appreciate it.